With 24 hours left on the clock, I gave up. She still despised me, still called me incompetent. But the moment I completely forgot her, the untouchable heiress, the woman who ruled her world from a glass tower, looked at me with red-rimmed eyes for the very first time. Ethan Hayes stared at his phone. A virtual countdown floated over the home screen. Target, Stella Lane. Time remaining, 00:23:59:58. The crimson numbers glowed like fresh blood. Tick. The timer slipped to 57 seconds. 3 years. He had been a complete fool for 3 years. He'd revolve his entire life around the Ice Queen of Lane Enterprises. He brought her coffee in the morning and made sure her car was waiting at night. He was available at moment's notice, a loyal shadow. All he got in return was her disdain, and a series of clipped, cold dismissals. Get out. The system's mission was brutally simple. Make Stella Lane genuinely say the words, "I like you." The time limit was 3 years. Success meant $1 billion. Failure meant a complete and total wipe of every memory he had of her, including the last 3 years of his life. Today was the final day. Ethan stood on the top floor of a Lane tower. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, he watched the traffic below crawl along the streets of Manhattan like ants. The glare of the sun was blinding. He loosened his tie, feeling a tightness in his chest. "Mr. Hayes." A cool, sharp voice cut through the air behind him. Ethan turned. Stella Lane stood there, a vision of corporate power in a custom-tailored suit. Her stiletto heels were weapons. Her makeup was flawless, and her eyes looked like they'd been cut from diamonds. "Where are the quarterly reports I asked for?" "I emailed them to you," Ethan said, his voice even. "Your efficiency is slipping," Stella noted with a frown. "I'll do better next time," he replied, looking down. Stella didn't spare him another glance, striding toward the CEO's office. The sharp click of her heels on the marble floor was a symphony of indifference. Ethan watched her go. Her silhouette was slim but unbending, like a white rose protected by thorns. He followed her silently. Inside her office, she slammed a folder onto her desk. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice dangerously low. "The year-over-year projections on page 3 are wrong." "Ethan, are you an idiot? How do you make such a rookie mistake?" Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was a perfectly aimed dart. Ethan picked up the folder. "My apologies, Ms. Lane. I'll run the numbers again and fix it immediately." "Useless," she breathed, sinking into her massive leather chair without looking at him again. Ethan backed out of the office, holding the folder. He closed the door softly. In the final crack before it latched, he saw her pinch the bridge of her nose, a flicker of deep exhaustion on her face. He leaned against the cold wall, the phone vibrating in his pocket. He didn't have to look. He knew the countdown was still ticking away. At lunch, in the corporate cafeteria, Ethan found a quiet corner with his tray. He'd barely taken a bite when someone sat down opposite him. Chadwick Kensington III, one of Stella's most obnoxious and persistent admirers. Well, if it isn't Stella's little lapdog," Chad sneered. "Heard you got chewed out again this morning. You're a real piece of work, Hayes. Your master kicks you, and you just keep wagging your tail." A few of Chad's sycophants at the next table snickered. Ethan didn't look up. He just kept eating. "What? The silent treatment now." Chad kicked the leg of the table. "I heard a rumor you're actually trying to make a move on her. Been clinging to her for 3 years. Have you ever looked in a mirror? You're punching so far above your weight, it's pathetic." Ethan finally put down his fork. "Chad, this is a cafeteria. Try to have some class." "Class?" Chad laughed. "Why would I bother having class around someone like you? You know I could have you fired tomorrow, right?" Ethan looked at him, his eyes calm and empty. "No, you couldn't." Chad's face darkened. "You little, what's all the noise?" The familiar, icy voice cut in. Stella was standing there, her brow furrowed in annoyance. "Stella." Chad's demeanor changed instantly, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Hey, nothing, just chatting with your assistant here." Stella's eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to Chad. "If you want to chat, do it somewhere else. You're disturbing the other employees." Right, of course," Chad said, nodding eagerly. "Hey, Stella, there's a charity gala tonight." "I'm busy," she cut him off. Her gaze landed on Ethan's tray, on the untouched salad. "Mr. Hayes, you're with me this afternoon. We're going to the East River construction site." "Now." Yes, Ms. Lane. Ethan stood, picked up his tray, and walked to the disposal station without giving Chad another look. The black Bentley purred as it left the underground garage. Ethan drove. Stella sat in the back, her eyes closed. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. In the rearview mirror, Ethan saw the faint, dark circles under her eyes. She must have been up all night working again. He quietly turned up the heat. Why is it so hot in here? Stella's voice was sharp, though her eyes remained closed. Are you trying to bake me alive? Sorry. Ethan immediately adjusted the temperature. Incompetent, she muttered, turning her head toward the window. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The countdown pulsed in his mind. Time remaining. 18 hours, 7 minutes, and 42 seconds. The construction site was a chaotic whirl of dust and noise. Stella, wearing a white hard hat, surveyed the scene with a deep frown. The project manager followed her, bowing and scraping. Ms. Lane, right this way. Your progress is unacceptable, Stella said, her voice like chips of ice. Yes, we'll speed things up. I want this building topped out by the end of next month. If it's not, you're all fired. Yes, Ms. Lane, absolutely. The man was sweating through his shirt. Ethan stayed a half step behind Stella, his eyes scanning their surroundings. He reached out and pushed aside a dangling electrical wire that she was about to walk into. She didn't notice. She was too busy tearing into the project manager. Suddenly, a wooden plank from the scaffolding above came loose. It tilted, then fell, plummeting directly towards Stella's head. Look out! Ethan's world narrowed. He moved on pure instinct, lunging forward and shoving her hard out of the way. Crack! The plank slammed onto the ground where she had been standing, grazing Ethan's arm as it fell. Dust exploded into the air. Mr. Hayes! The project manager yelled. Stella stumbled from the force of the push. When she regained her balance, she saw the splintered plank on the ground and the torn sleeve of Ethan's suit jacket. Blood was already seeping through his dress shirt. Her face went pale. Are you all right, Ms. Lane? Ethan cut her off, his voice steady, as if he wasn't the one who was injured. Stella stared at the gash on his arm, her lips pressed into a thin line. Don't be a hero, she snapped. I saw it. I would have moved. Don't ever make decisions for me again. She turned and continued walking, her pace noticeably faster. Ethan watched her go, a bitter smile touching his lips. He tore a strip of fabric from the bottom of his shirt and crudely wrapped it around the wound. Then he followed her. The countdown ticked on. Time remaining. 15 hours, 22 minutes, and 11 seconds. On the drive back, Stella was silent, staring out the window. The wound on Ethan's arm throbbed. He focused on the road. Pull over, she said suddenly. Ethan steered the car to the curb. Go buy a bottle of water. I want it cold. Yes, Ms. Lane. He got out and went into a convenience store. He returned with 2 bottles of ice-cold water and handed one to her. Stella took it, but didn't drink. Her eyes were fixed on his bandaged arm. Does it hurt? Ethan was stunned. It's fine. Useless, she said, twisting the cap off the bottle. Can't even look after yourself. She took a long sip of water. Find a pharmacy, she commanded. Get some antiseptic and proper bandages. I can't have you getting an infection. It would interfere with your work. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Okay. He put the car in drive and pulled back into traffic. The countdown flashed. Time remaining. 14 hours, 58 minutes, and 3 seconds. In 3 years, that was the first time she had ever shown a flicker of concern for him, even if it was wrapped in ice. That evening, at a charity gala, the air was thick with perfume and the murmur of polite conversation. Stella was the center of attention in a stunning, wine-red gown. She was a frozen, beautiful flame. Ethan, in a spare suit he kept at the office, stood quietly behind her. The professionally dressed wound on his arm was a dull, constant reminder of his rapidly expiring time. Chad Kensington materialized with 2 glasses of champagne. Stella, you look breathtaking tonight. Stella's face was a mask of indifference. Is there something you need, Chad? Can a guy just offer you a drink? He said, his eyes sliding over to Ethan. I heard there was some drama at the construction site this afternoon. Our boy Hayes here played hero, I hear. He raised his voice just enough for those nearby to overhear. Stella's eyes turned cold. It has nothing to do with you. How can you say that? I care about your safety, Chad said, leaning closer. An assistant that dedicated. You don't think he has ideas above his station? He looked at Ethan with open mockery. Ethan's expression didn't change. You're mistaken, Mr. Kensington. I was just doing my job. Your job? Chad scoffed. Does that include taking a hit for the boss? That's some next-level loyalty. Chad, Stella's voice was sharp. You're talking too much. If you have nothing else to say, please move. Chad's smile faltered. Stella, don't let this lowlife. He's my assistant, Stella said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of command. And you are in no position to speak about him. Now move. Chad froze, his face cycling through shades of red and white. At his side, Ethan's hand, hidden from view, clenched into a fist. Time remaining, 10 hours, 41 minutes, and 29 seconds. The gala wore on. An endless stream of people came to tow Stella. She drank far more than she should have. A faint blush colored her cheeks, and her sharp eyes had softened slightly. Her alcohol tolerance was low, but she would never show weakness. Ethan subtly intercepted several glasses intended for her. Ms. Lane isn't feeling well, he'd say smoothly. I'll drink on her behalf. He'd down the champagne in one go, the bubbles stinging his throat. Stella watched him, her expression unreadable. Finally, it was over. As they left, Stella's steps were unsteady. Ethan reached out to support her arm. Careful, Ms. Lane. She tried to shrug him off. I don't need your help. I can walk. She took a defiant step forward and nearly tripped over the hem of her own gown. Ethan caught her again. This time, she didn't pull away. She just lowered her head, leaning on his strength as they made their way to the parking garage. A cool night breeze swept through, and she shivered. Ethan slipped off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. You don't have to. She started to protest. Just wear it, he said, his voice low. You'll get sick. She fell silent, pulling the jacket tighter. It smelled faintly of him, a clean, mint-like scent, and still held his warmth. The countdown flickered in his mind. Time remaining, 8 hours, 12 minutes, and 45 seconds. It felt like a funeral bell. He drove her back to her penthouse apartment in Midtown. After parking the car, he turned to her. We're here, Ms. Lane. Stella was leaning against the headrest, her eyes closed. She seemed to have fallen asleep. Her long lashes cast shadows on her cheeks. Stripped of her daytime armor, she looked quiet, almost fragile. Ethan just watched her, a dull ache spreading through his chest. 3 years, over 1,000 days. He was her shadow. He watched her frown. He watched her lose her temper. He watched her work until she was exhausted. He saw the rare moments of vulnerability she never let anyone else see. But he could never get any closer. The system's cold countdown was the sword hanging over his head, ready to drop. Ms. Lane, he said softly. Her eyelashes fluttered. She opened her eyes, which were still hazy with sleep and alcohol. Are we here? Yes. She rubbed her temples. What time is it? Almost midnight. Stella opened the car door. The night air tousled her hair as she stood by the car, looking at him. Today, she began, then hesitated. Thank you. The words were so quiet, the wind almost carried them away. Ethan thought he'd misheard. What? Nothing, she said, turning her face away. You can go home. She walked toward the building's entrance. Ethan sat in the car, watching her slim back disappear behind the glass doors. Time remaining, 7 hours, 59 minutes, and 1 second, 7 hours left. Ethan didn't go home. He drove to a lookout point over the East River and killed the engine. He sat in the darkness, staring at the glittering lights of the city. His phone screen was still lit, the numbers marching relentlessly forward. 6 hours, 34 minutes, and 18 seconds. 5 hours, 11 minutes, and 2 seconds. 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 55 seconds. He remembered the first time he saw her. 3 years ago, at a recruitment event for Lane Enterprises. She was there to select a new executive assistant. Dressed in a black power suit, her presence filled the room. Her gaze swept over the candidates like a queen surveying her subjects. He saw her, and in the same instant, he heard the cold, mechanical voice in his head. System binding complete. Target, Stella Lane. Mission, obtain a genuine confession of I like you from the target. Time limit, 3 years. Reward, $1 billion. Penalty for failure. Complete erasure of all memories related to the target. He thought it would be easy. He wasn't bad-looking, and he was more than capable. Instead, for 3 years, he became her assistant, and in her eyes, the most infuriating person she knew. She called him useless, incompetent, delusional. He always thought it was because he wasn't doing enough, wasn't trying hard enough. Until one day, he overheard her on the phone with a friend. That Ethan Hayes, God, he's so annoying. Like gum on my shoe, I can't get rid of him. Just looking at him makes my skin crawl. Honestly, if he wasn't so good at his job, I would have fired him ages ago. That was the moment he understood. Her dislike for him wasn't based on his performance. It was visceral. Nothing he could ever do would change it. The countdown continued. 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. The sun rose, casting a golden sheen across the river. Ethan started the car and drove back to the office. It was his last day. He wanted to see it through to the end. The office was still empty. He went through the motions, making himself a black coffee. No sugar. It was bitter, like the last 3 years of his life. He sat at his desk, turned on his computer, and began sorting through emails. The rhythmic click of his keyboard filled the quiet space. The countdown in his head was like a second heartbeat. 59 minutes and 59 seconds, 59 minutes and 58 seconds. Colleagues began to arrive, greeting him as they passed. Morning, Ethan. Morning. You're in early today. Yeah. Hey, what happened to your arm? Just a scratch. It's nothing. Everything was normal. Only he knew that a fundamental part of his world was about to be erased. 30 minutes. Stella arrived, looking radiant as always. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor announced her approach. Ethan looked up, watching her walk toward him. Good morning, Ms. Lane. Morning. She didn't break her stride, heading straight for her office. Ethan, in my office. Yes, Ms. Lane. He stood and followed her inside. The door closed, sealing them off from the rest of the world. 15 minutes and 27 seconds. Stella put down her purse and walked to the panoramic window, her back to him. Last night, she began, her voice hesitant. I had too much to drink. I said some things. Don't read too much into it. Ethan felt his heart sink. The last, tiny ember of hope he didn't even know he was holding onto was extinguished. What things are you referring to, Ms. Lane? It doesn't matter. She turned around, her expression once again an impenetrable mask of cold professionalism. What's on the schedule for today? Ethan recited the day's appointments, his voice perfectly calm, without a trace of emotion. The countdown pulsed. 5 minutes and 14 seconds. 5 minutes and 13 seconds. And at 3 p.m., a video conference with Mr. Davis from Sterling Corp. When he finished, a brief silence fell over the office. Stella was looking at him, a strange, searching expression in her eyes. You. She started to say something but stopped herself. She just waved a dismissive hand. Fine. You can go. Yes, Ms. Lane. He turned and walked to the door. His hand closed around the cold metal handle. The countdown. 59 seconds, 58 seconds. A silent, final farewell. He pulled the door open and stepped out. He closed it softly behind him. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Midnight ding. 3-year mission duration has expired. Mission failed. Initiating memory erasure protocol. The mechanical voice screamed in his head. BZT. The world went black. A violent wave of vertigo washed over him. It felt like a phantom hand had plunged into his skull, grabbing fistfuls of memories, every single one related to Stella Lane, and was now ripping them out. Tearing, shredding, excruciating pain. He let out a choked gasp, pressing himself against the wall to keep from collapsing. Countless images flashed before his eyes before dissolving into static and smoke. The first time he saw her, her cold gaze, her voice calling him useless, the way she looked when she was exhausted, the feel of his jacket on her shoulders. Every picture, every sound, every feeling, it was all being scrubbed away by a relentless, brutal eraser. Fading, blurring, vanishing. NNGH. Ethan curled in on himself, his forehead pressed against the cool wall, cold sweat instantly soaking his shirt. 3 seconds, or maybe an eternity, passed. The pain and dizziness receded like a tide going out. Ethan gasped for air, slowly straightening up. His eyes were blank. Who am I? Where am I? What was I just doing? He looked around at the bright, open-plan office at the busy employees. It was all familiar, yet deeply, unsettlingly strange. He looked down at his own hands, which were trembling slightly. There was a clean bandage wrapped around his forearm. How did I get this? He couldn't remember. He shook his head, trying to clear the lingering fog. His gaze fell on a closed door of the CEO's office. Who works in there? And why was I just standing in front of that door? A female colleague walked by. Ethan, you look terrible. Are you okay? I'm fine. He managed a weak smile. Maybe just low blood sugar. Oh, well, you should go grab something to eat then. She walked away. Ethan rubbed his temples and decided to get a coffee from the break room. He turned his back on the CEO's office and started walking. His steps were a little unsteady, but his eyes were calm again. An empty, blank calmness. As if the woman named Stella Lane had never existed. As if the 1,000 days of silent devotion and quiet suffering had never happened. It was all over. Reset to zero. Memory erasure complete. System unbinding. Unbinding successful. We wish the host a prosperous future. The cold, mechanical voice was gone. Without a trace. Inside the CEO's office, Stella stood just behind the door, her hand still on the handle. After she had dismissed him, a strange and inexplicable anxiety had gripped her. A sense of panic, like she was about to lose something vital. After a few seconds of hesitation, she pulled the door open again, intending to call him back for something, anything. The hallway was empty. He was already gone. She poked her head out and saw his back as he walked toward the break room. He looked unsteady on his feet. Stella frowned. Is he still drunk from last night? Or is his arm hurting him? She opened her mouth to call his name. F. The sound died in her throat. She watched as he paused, leaning against the wall for a moment to steady himself. Then, he turned, his gaze sweeping vaguely in her direction. Stella instinctively recoiled, but the moment their eyes met, she froze. His expression, it was completely alien. It wasn't his usual deference. It wasn't his occasional, weary resignation. It wasn't the quiet pain she'd seen when he was hurt. It was a complete, total blank. He looked at her as if she were a stranger he'd passed on the street. No, it was worse than that. His gaze held no curiosity, no recognition, not even a flicker of interest. It was a pure, blank, and empty nothingness. As if in his eyes, she, her office, this entire floor, held no more significance than a potted plant in the hallway or the fire extinguisher on the wall. Stella's heart plummeted, seized by an icy fist. Ethan, she called out, her voice tight with an anxiety she didn't recognize. His gaze focused on her, and his brow furrowed with faint confusion. Hello, he said. His voice was polite, level, distant. Can I help you with something? Stella felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. The blood in her veins turned to ice. She stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. What? What did you say? I asked if I could help you. Ethan repeated, his frown deepening. He seemed to think this beautiful, but strangely intense, executive was behaving very oddly. I'm Stella Lane, she practically snarled, her voice trembling. Stella Lane. Ethan repeated the name, his expression still blank, as if searching a mental database for an entry that didn't exist. Then, he shook his head, offering a polite, distant smile. I'm sorry, he said. I don't believe we've met. Are you new here? Were you looking for me? Boom. Something shattered inside Stella's mind. Don't know me. He doesn't know me. He's talking to me like a stranger. 3 years. For 3 solid years, he had been her shadow. He endured her temper. He took the fall for her. He got hurt for her. Yesterday, just yesterday, Stella's mind flashed to his arm. She stared at the bandage. He got that protecting her from a falling plank. How could he not know who she was? Ethan. Her voice was shrill, laced with a panic that terrified her. Stop playing games. Look at me. It's me, Stella, your boss. Her outburst clearly startled him. His brow furrowed even more, and his expression shifted from confusion to something like wary concern. Ma'am, he said, taking a half step back, his tone still polite, but now clearly guarded. I think you must have me confused with someone else. Or, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Are you feeling all right? Should I call a doctor for you? Confused him with someone else? Call a doctor? A bone-deep chill spread through Stella, starting from her toes and racing to the crown of her head. She stared at Ethan's familiar face, now a canvas of utter strangeness. She looked into the eyes that had always watched her with quiet intensity, and found nothing but an unnerving void. This wasn't an act. Absolutely not. He truly didn't remember her. Completely, utterly, cleanly, as if she had never once existed in his life. Why? How could this happen? He was fine yesterday. He shielded me for that plank. Her mind was a chaotic storm of images. Him quietly handing her warm water. Him draping his jacket over her shoulders. Him drinking for her. The blood on his arm. And last night, when she had leaned on him on the way to her apartment, that fleeting moment of security. You. Stella's voice broke. An overwhelming, stinging sensation flooded her eyes. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, fighting back the humiliating tears. She looked at the confused, detached man before her. The man who had followed her for 3 years. The man she had called useless for 3 years. The man who had silently stood by her through it all. The man who she had actually. Stella took a ragged breath, summoning every last ounce of her strength. She clung to one last, desperate hope, a hope she hadn't even dared to acknowledge until this very moment. Her voice was a shattered whisper. Ethan, do you remember? Thumper. It was the name of the pet rabbit she'd had as a child, a pet that had died far too soon. It was the one secret, the one moment of true vulnerability she had ever let slip in front of him, late one night when she was exhausted and drunk. It was the softest, most hidden part of her, buried deep beneath her armor of ice. She stared into his eyes, praying, begging to see a flicker of recognition in that terrifying emptiness, even the smallest ripple. Ethan's expression remained one of pure confusion. He blinked, as if trying to process the bizarre question. Then, he shook his head apologetically. Sorry, he said. I don't have any pets. Ma'am, are you sure you're not mistaken? That last, fragile thread of hope didn't just snap. It disintegrated into cold, dead ash. Stella stared at him, at the genuine bewilderment in his eyes, at his polite, distant apology, at the undeniable truth that he had truly, completely forgotten her. An agony more piercing than any business failure, more painful than any betrayal, seized her heart and squeezed. It hurt more than anything she had ever felt. It hurt so much she couldn't breathe. The carefully constructed, frigid world she had built around herself for more than 2 decades. In that single moment, it shattered into a million pieces. You. Stella opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat was choked with a grief so immense it was suffocating. And then the tears she had fought so hard to contain finally broke free. Hot, searing tears streamed down her face, carving 2 wet, pathetic tracks through her perfect makeup. Her eyes, red and wild, were locked on the man who was now a stranger. For the first time in front of him, she was utterly, completely broken. How could you forget me? Her voice was a fractured, desperate sob that echoed in the quiet hallway. Ethan was completely stunned by her sudden breakdown. He was at a total loss. Ma'am, please don't cry. I really don't know you. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. He took a hesitant step forward, intending to offer a tissue to help in some way. But Stella flinched back as if his touch would burn her, her back slamming into the cold doorframe of her office. She saw his outstretched hand, saw the pure, uncomprehending concern on his face, saw the absolute certainty that he remembered nothing. A tidal wave of despair and anguish finally crashed over her, pulling her under. She could no longer stand. She slid down the doorframe to the floor. Covering her face with her hands, the sob she had suppressed for so long erupted, muffled and ragged, through her fingers. Her shoulders shook violently. She looked like a small, abandoned animal, lost and utterly alone. Ethan froze, his hands suspended in midair. He stared at the woman crumpled on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He was completely and utterly baffled. What in the world is going on? A dull ache throbbed in his temples, the phantom pain of the earlier vertigo returning. His memory was a chaotic, empty slate. 11. He let out a sigh. He decided the best course of action was to get away from this bizarre situation and find that coffee. Maybe low blood sugar really could cause hallucinations. He cast one last, bewildered glance at the weeping stranger on the floor, shook his head, and turned. He walked away toward the break room. 1 step, 2 steps. The sound of her choked, heartbreaking sobs followed him. Ethan paused for a fraction of a second. He felt a strange, inexplicable prickle in his chest, a tiny, fleeting pang of something. He frowned, shook the feeling away, and kept walking. His back was straight, his stride determined. He didn't look back, as if the collapsing world he left behind him had nothing to do with him at all. Epilogue. This time, I'll be the one chasing you. 12. Stella sat on a bench in the sterile hospital corridor, her hands clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. She couldn't feel the pain. 3 hours ago, she had watched Ethan look at her with the eyes of a stranger and walk away without a second glance. Ms. Lane, a doctor in a white coat, emerged from a room. Stella shot to her feet. How is he? The test results are in, the doctor said, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Hayes's brain scans show absolutely nothing abnormal. No concussion, no hemorrhaging, no physical trauma of any kind that could explain this memory loss. Stella bit her lip. Then why? Psychogenic amnesia is a possibility, the doctor said carefully. Amnesia brought on by extreme psychological distress. But for a patient to have such a complete and selective memory wipe of a single individual, for the memory gap to be so precise. In my 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like it. Stella's heart sank into a black abyss. Can it be cured? It's hard to say. The doctor shook his head. If it's trauma-induced, recovery could take a very long time. Or, he paused. It may never come back at all. Never. The word was a knife that twisted in her gut. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Ms. Lane, I'm fine. She took a deep breath. Where is he now? We've given him a mild sedative. He was quite agitated. He's resting in his room. Stella nodded. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated. You can, but please don't try to force his memories. As far as his brain is concerned, he has no idea who you are. I know, Stella whispered, a bitter smile on her lips. She pushed the door to his room open gently. Ethan was sleeping, but his brow was still furrowed, as if fighting something even in his dreams. She stood by his bed, just looking at him. This face. She had looked at this face for 3 years, scolded it for 3 years, despised it for 3 years, and now she missed it more than she could possibly breathe. She reached out a trembling hand, wanting to smooth the worry from his brow, but stopped just short of touching him. Ethan, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. Do you really not remember a single thing about me? The only reply was the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. 13. Back in her office at Lane Enterprises, Stella stared at a security feed on her monitor. On the screen, she watched the moment it happened. Ethan, standing outside her office door, suddenly clutching his head, bending over in agony. And then, he straightened up. His expression changed, from pain to confusion to a complete blank. Play it again, she told the head of security, her voice hoarse. From 10 minutes before, the footage rewound. She watched herself dismiss him, watch him walk out, pause, and lean against the wall. And then, he turned, his gaze sweeping across the hallway. For a split second, he looked directly at the security camera. In that moment, Stella held her breath. His eyes, they looked like he was saying goodbye. Stop. She slammed her hand on the desk. Zoom in there. The image froze on the moment, just before the pain hit him. His lips, they were moving. Can you enhance the audio? I'll try, Ms. Lane. The security chief worked his magic. Through a layer of static, a single muffled word became faintly audible. Stella. A tremor went through her entire body. Play it again. This time she heard it clearly. The last word he spoke before his world was wiped clean. Her name. Stella. And then, he forgot her. Completely. Forever. Get out, she said to the security chief, her voice trembling. Now. The moment the door closed, Stella collapsed, burying her face in her arms on the desk. Her shoulders shook with violent, silent sobs that soaked the expensive mahogany. 14. 3 days later, Ethan was discharged. The official diagnosis was transient global amnesia. The recommendation was rest and observation. Stella was waiting by her car when he walked out of the hospital. The sunlight made him look pale, but his eyes were clear. When he saw her, he gave a polite, professional nod. Ms. Lane. Not Stella, not even just Lane, but a formal, distant Ms. Lane. I'll give you a ride home, Stella said, fighting to keep her voice steady. That's not necessary. Thank you, Ethan replied with a small smile. I could get a cab. It's a work-related incident, Stella insisted. You were on the clock when it happened. She almost said, when you were saving my life. But she stopped herself. Ethan hesitated. Well, thank you then. He opened the back door and got in, deliberately creating a space between them. Stella gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Once upon a time, she was the one who sat in the back. He was always in the driver's seat, her silent protector. Now, an invisible chasm of memory separated them. The drive was suffocatingly silent. How are you? Stella began, her eyes meeting his in the rearview mirror. How are you feeling? Better, Ethan said, looking out the window. The doctor said I can come back to work in a few days. There's no rush, Stella said quickly. Take as much time as you need. Your salary will be paid in full. He turned to look at her, surprised. Is that standard company policy? I'm the boss, she blurted out, then immediately regretted it. That high-handed, arrogant tone. It was how she had always spoken to him before. She was right to regret it. A cool, professional mask fell over his features. Thank you for your consideration, Ms. Lane. He turned back to the window. Stella bit her lip. Ethan. Yes. Do you really remember nothing? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. In the mirror, she saw him frown. I am sorry. The doctors called it selective amnesia. Any memories concerning you, they're just not there. Though, according to my HR file, I have in fact been your executive assistant for the past 3 years. He said it calmly, as if reading a weather report. Stella's heart clenched. Then, she struggled to get the words out. Do you know what our relationship was? She wished she could take the question back. It was too direct. Ethan was clearly taken aback. A professional one, I'd assume. Employer and employee. 3 years. Over 1,000 days. In his mouth, it was nothing more than a dry entry in a personnel file. 15. Stella slammed on the brakes. The Bentley screeched to a halt at the side of the road. What's wrong? Ethan asked, alarmed. A cat, Stella lied, pointing at the empty street ahead. Ethan looked, his brow furrowed, but he didn't challenge her. I'm sorry, Stella said, taking a shaky breath and putting the car back in drive. I was distracted. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the trip. 16. When they arrived at his apartment building, Stella put the car in park. We're here, she said. Thank you, Ms. Lane. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt, but paused. Can I ask you something? Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. What is it? It seems, he began, choosing his words with care, that you're very invested in whether or not I remember you. And he gestured to the healing wound on his arm. HR classified this as a workplace injury, but the file was vague on the details. I was just wondering, did something happen between us? Stella gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. Did something happen? She had called him useless. She had humiliated him. She had treated him like a possession for 3 years. And he had shielded her from harm. He had protected her. He had quietly loved her for 3 years. And in the end, he had forgotten her. No, she heard herself say, her voice brittle. Nothing happened. We had a strictly professional relationship. Oh, Ethan nodded. He seemed a little disappointed and also a little relieved. Well, I'll see you at the office. He got out of the car and walked into his building without looking back. Stella sat there, watching until he was gone. Then, she slammed her fist onto the steering wheel. The horn blared, a raw, ugly sound that sent a flock of pigeons scattering into the sky. The next day, Ethan was at work on time. Through the blinds of her office, Stella watched him. Colleagues gathered around his desk, welcoming him back. He responded politely, his smile warm but distant, as if he were meeting them all for the first time. Stella took a deep breath and walked out of her office. Ethan, he turned. Ms. Lane. He nodded respectfully. How are you feeling? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Much better, Thank you. Good. She hesitated. Could you come into my office for a moment? There's some work I need to brief you on. Of course. He picked up a notepad and followed her. After she closed the door, Stella handed him a cup of coffee. The way you like it, she said. Black. No sugar. Ethan blinked, surprised. Thank you. He took a sip, and his brow furrowed. What's wrong? Stella asked. It's very bitter, he said, putting the cup down. Did I really used to drink this? Stella froze. Of course. He used to drink black coffee because she drank it. He would stay with her, matching her cup for cup during late nights at the office. Now he didn't remember, and he didn't remember why he would ever force himself to drink something so bitter. I might have remembered wrong, she said, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. It's all right, Ethan said with a small smile. I can get used to it again. He opened his notepad. What did you need to discuss, Ms. Lane? Looking at his all-business attitude, a wave of frustration washed over Stella. Nothing important, she said, turning her back to him to face the window. I just wanted to ask, are you settling in okay at home? Ethan was clearly confused. My apartment is fine. It's conveniently located. Stella turned back to him. Do you need anything? Groceries, essentials. You just got out of the hospital. His expression grew wary. Ms. Lane, are you this concerned about all your employees? The blunt question caught her off guard. Of course not, she snapped, then immediately realized her mistake. Your situation is unique. The amnesia, the workplace injury. The more she tried to explain, the more tangled her words became, and the more suspicious he looked. Thank you for your concern, he said finally, his tone formal. But I can take care of myself. If there's nothing else, I should get back to my desk. All Stella could do was nod. The moment the door closed, she grabbed a folder from her desk and hurled it against the wall. Papers scattered across the floor, a perfect reflection of her chaotic heart. At lunchtime, Stella stood at the entrance of the cafeteria, watching Ethan eat alone. She took a deep breath, got her own food, and walked over to his table. Is this seat taken? Ethan looked up, startled. Ms. Lane. It's crowded today, Stella lied, her eyes sweeping over the dozens of empty tables around them. Ethan followed her gaze, a small frown appearing on his face, but he didn't call her out. Please. He shifted over to make room. Stella sat down, sneaking glances at his tray. Steamed vegetables, grilled chicken, brown rice. It was healthy but bland. Is that all you're eating? She couldn't help but ask. The doctor recommended a light diet, he said. You used to. She almost said, love spicy food, but caught herself. Yes, he prompted. Nothing. She looked down at her own food. The silence between them was thick and awkward. Ms. Lane, Ethan said suddenly. Can I ask you something? What is it? Stella's heart leaped. He looked her directly in the eye. Your behavior toward me. It's strange. My colleagues told me you used to be very demanding, very harsh. But now, he searched for the right word. You seem very concerned about me. Stella's chopsticks clattered onto the table. They also told me, Ethan continued, that I followed you everywhere for 3 years. That I was always available like a shadow. He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. So I have to wonder, was there something more to our relationship? More to our relationship. Those words were a key, unlocking a floodgate of emotion she could no longer contain. Ethan, she heard herself say, her voice shaking. What if I told you that we were almost together? Would you believe me? He stared at her, stunned. What do you mean? Stella took the plunge, that you were in love with me. For 3 years. And I was a blind idiot. And it wasn't until I lost you, until you forgot me, that I realized Her voice broke, the words getting stuck in her throat. Ethan's expression shifted from shock to confusion and finally to pity. Ms. Lane, he said softly, I think perhaps you're projecting your feelings for someone else onto me. Because I lost my memory, maybe you feel a sense of guilt, and so... No! Stella shot to her feet, knocking her tray over. Soup splashed onto her expensive suit, but she didn't care. Ethan, she shouted, her voice ringing through the now silent cafeteria. You listen to me. I like you, me. Stella Lane, I'm in love with you, Ethan Hayes. The entire room was frozen. Every eye was on them. Ethan was speechless, his face a mask of disbelief. You need to calm down. I am calm. Stella's voice trembled with a wild, desperate energy. 3 years. You chased me for 3 years. Now, it's my turn to chase you. That's fair, isn't it? Without waiting for an answer, she turned and stormed out, leaving behind a restaurant full of stunned colleagues and a completely bewildered Ethan Hayes. After that day, the entire company was buzzing. The Ice Queen CEO, Stella Lane, was pursuing her former assistant who had amnesia. The rumor mill went into overdrive, with the most popular theory being that Ethan had lost his memory out of heartbreak from her rejection. Stella ignored it all. She was too busy creating her plan to win back Ethan. Step 1. Breakfast. Every morning, a perfectly prepared breakfast would appear on Ethan's desk. She alternated between American and continental, always with a handwritten note. Good morning, Ethan. Stella. The first day, Ethan shared the breakfast with his coworkers. The second day, he sent her an email. Thank you for the gesture, but this is an unnecessary expense. The third day, the breakfast was returned, untouched, and left outside her office door. She wasn't discouraged. Step 2. Accidental encounters. The parking garage, the elevator, the coffee machine. Stella just happened to be everywhere Ethan was. What a coincidence, she'd say every time, her eyes bright. Ethan went from being surprised to resigned to exasperated. A week later, he cornered her in the elevator. Ms. Lane, can we talk? Of course, Stella said, her heart pounding. My office. Right here is fine. He hit the emergency stop button, and the elevator shuddered to a halt between floors. What exactly are you trying to do? He asked, his voice tired. I'm trying to win you over, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. What? Because I like you. But I don't remember you, he said, frowning. This doesn't feel fair to you. Then get to know me again. Stella took a step closer, closing the distance between them. Hi, Ethan. My name is Stella Lane. I'm 28 years old. I like black coffee, but it makes it hard for me to sleep. I have a terrible temper, but I'm working on it. And once upon a time, a wonderful, foolish man liked me for 3 years. And now I want to be the one who likes him. The elevator was silent, save for the sound of their breathing. Ethan looked at her, his expression a complex mix of emotions. Ms. Lane. Stella, she corrected him. He sighed. Stella, my memory might never come back. I know. We might never be able to go back to what you think we had. I know. I don't even know if I'll ever feel that way again. I know. Stella cut him off. But that's okay. We can start over. From scratch. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he reached over and pressed the button to resume the elevator's journey. Give me some time, he said. Okay. Stella nodded, her heart soaring. As long as it takes. I'll wait. Just like you waited 3 years for me, she added silently. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped out, then paused. He looked back over his shoulder. Today's breakfast, he said. It was too salty. Stella stared for a second, then broke into a radiant smile. I'll do better tomorrow, she called after his retreating back, her voice full of a joy she hadn't felt in years. 3 months later, at the Lane Enterprises annual holiday party, Ethan sat at a table in the back, watching Stella command the stage. She was giving a speech, looking breathtaking in a red dress. And finally, she said, her eyes suddenly finding his in the crowd, I want to give a special thanks to one person. The room quieted. 3 months ago, she continued, I lost someone very important to me. While he was still here physically, his memories were gone, along with everything we had ever shared. I thought I'd lost those memories forever. But what I've learned is that memories can fade, but feelings have a way of sticking around. Her gaze was locked on Ethan. So, Ethan, a murmur went through the crowd. Even though you don't remember, I need to say it. Thank you for liking me. And now, it's my turn. A spotlight suddenly swung over and illuminated him. He froze, trapped in the beam of light, the sound of his colleagues' whispers and cheers buzzing in his ears. All he could see was Stella, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She looked like the brightest star in the night sky. He stood up, and, under the stunned gaze of the entire company, he walked toward the stage. Stella watched him approach, her heart thundering. Ethan, chill. He raised a finger to her lips, and then, in front of everyone, he kissed her. It was a kiss full of a passion and certainty that felt like a confession 3 years in the making. When they finally broke apart, Stella's eyes were wet. You remember? No. Ethan shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. But you were right. Memories might disappear. But feelings, they don't. He cupped her face in his hands. I don't remember why I fell in love with you, he said, his voice low and for her alone. But I know that from the moment I saw you again. My heart never lied. Stella's tears finally fell. Idiot, she choked out. It's my turn now, she whispered. I know. Then, Stella pulled him back in for another kiss, sealing their new beginning.